This is the UK Brand Show with Penny Williams and Mark Challinor.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And good morning, Penny.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm very good. Are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. But you've been busy, haven't you, the last few weekends?
I have been busy.
Out.
Yeah, I have been busy. I have been busy, yeah.
You are not in lockdowns and everything else. You're making the most of it, aren't you? You're back doing your gigs.
I am back doing gigs and all that goes with it, yeah. So, well, it all started because, I normally go to Glastonbury, every year. And of course, Glastonbury hasn't happened for a couple of years now. And I've done it for 10 years on the run. And suddenly it was taken away. So the guys I normally go to Glastonbury, there were 5 of us in total. We decided we'd have a boys' weekend away in Brighton, which is not quite the same thing, of course, but there were various gigs on during that weekend. So we sort of treated it as such in terms of consumption of alcohol and music listening. So that was good. But the good thing to come from the back of all of that, so long story short, is we've now got tickets for Glastonbury next year. So we're back on the wagon. So that should be good.
Did you watch any of the special broadcasts this weekend? From Paris, London, and New York for the.
No, I didn't. I watched something else. What did you watch? It?
I recorded it because I was out, but I watched Ed Sheeran last night, which was absolutely awesome. I mean, he is just an amazing performer.
I did watch something else, funny enough, which was so when I was a kid growing up, one of the bands I got into early on was Genesis. They were like, it's like prog rock band really with Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins or whatever. And so my friend and I are going to see their last ever gig. They're not forming, and they're going to call it a day. They're doing about 8 shows in London at the O2 in a few weeks, and we're going to the last show of the last 8 gigs. So we'll be there at the start. We're at the start, we're there at the end. But the point of me telling you is that there was a show they did in Rome on Sky Arts at the weekend, and it was at Circus Maximus, this big outdoor venue in Rome, and it was in front of an audience of 500,000 people, and I've never ever seen such a crowd. It was
How do you get that number of?
Well, there's very few places that can hold that sort of number, and this Circus Maximus place can.
Really?
This old Roman Empire expanse, and it was just, you couldn't see the end. I mean, how on earth you could see anything beyond the first 100 yards, I don't know, but this goes back for miles. I've been in some big crowds in my time, like last night to Glastonbury when the Rolling Stones have played, or U2 or whatever, but I've never seen anything like this ever before.
They weren't worried about COVID then?
Obviously not. No, but I think this was about 6 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
This was a repeat of, but it was just like, oh my goodness, that's just incredible. Cool. Anyway, there we go. So today, Pen, we're going to talk about the state of advertising and where the advertising market is, because I was honoured to run what was called an Inmar Masterclass of my news association I'm attached to, but we have various initiatives in certain areas of the media, which way we do like a deep dive into certain things, and we have one on data, and we have one on subscriptions, stuff like that. And I've just launched one. I've just been asked to launch one on behalf of the advertising community and the future of advertising, what we should be concentrating our efforts on. And once again, we've said this so many times, and it's so true, that depending, it doesn't matter whether you're a small, tiny company or a huge company, the concepts of what we should be doing and focusing on are the same.
Yeah.
And I thought this was a good little summary. I was going to just share some initial thoughts I did for the masterclass with everyone today on just helpful. What it is, where the market is. And what the things are we should be concentrating on in the future, especially post pandemic, if that's where we are.
It's difficult to predict, really, though, isn't it? Some of the principles
it is
cover, but it is an uncertain time ahead of us.
It very much is, yeah. Nobody really knows for sure, but we can have some sort of idea, because it was heading that way anyway before the pandemic, and the pandemic has accelerated certain ways. So we can sort of still have some confidence of where it's all going and what's coming next. So so anyway, let me share my screen, and there we are. So can you see me on there? Yes, my slide. So I was going to start with a few thoughts on what I thought where the advertising market is. And again, this was for media, but it doesn't necessarily have to be for media. It applies to anyone. But this is what it was called. And I did it over 3 weeks. It was a 3-week whole thing about where advertising is going. So the pillars of this masterclass, as we called it, people came over 3 weeks, and we talked about the state of advertising, as I say, post-pandemic, if that's where we are, and how we shape our future focus. And when we talked about how we compete and grow ad revenues, so if you get a website where you take advertising, how do you sort of grow that revenue in what's a challenging marketplace, of course, especially since COVID. And then finally, we talked about, as part of all of that, how do we reshape our organization for the future, getting the right tools and right approaches and right people and the right skills, and if you've got a sales team, what should they be selling in the future as far as advertising is concerned? So there's a lot of things to come out of that. And I think today, I think this is part one. So it's the state of advertising, the future of advertising, if you like, part one. And then the next show we'll do part two, which is a particular focus on one area, which I'll come to, which I think will be relevant to everyone on this call. So the objectives of the masterclass is really giving every company needs to know what's next in advertising in this, what is more than ever a fast moving time. And give a practical view. And it was aimed at an executive level. So not for salespeople necessarily. If this is really for the CEO levels and the senior commercial people, who are the people listening in today, really. So, what's an overview of the best trends and practices for the year ahead and beyond. And the idea why it was aimed that way was because I believe there are a lot of, senior people in organizations, big and small, who understand that there are things we should be focusing on, but they don't really know the detail of, So for example, it's a good example of a lot of media companies now are into something called programmatic advertising. And programmatic advertising is very much about the advertiser buying an audience digitally. And they're not buying you because you happen to be, the Birmingham Post and Mail or the Daily Mirror or whatever it might be. They're buying you because they want a particular audience that you serve. So it might be a bit of the Birmingham Post and Mail, a bit of the Mirror, and a bit of the Guardian, a bit of this, that, and the other. So it just depends, but they buy it digitally in a certain, what they call marketplaces. And we won't get into that today. We haven't got time to, but all I'm really making a point of, it was to say to those executives, look, you may know a little bit about this being on your lofty perch sometimes, but here's some details behind that. So you're able to competently shape your sales teams going forward and talk to them at their level, if you like. And then finally, it was all about showcasing trends in advertising and, look at the best case studies where companies have not just survived through it all, but they've also thrived in this new era. So that was the whole point of doing it. Anyway, I looked at all of this. And I thought, what now post-pandemic and what's the state of the advertising market? And having thought all about it all, I found myself coming back to one specific example, which in my thinking covers much of the focuses right now. And it's sort of microcosm of where we all are and what we're all trying to tackle. And that's Buzzfeed. And you'll see why, because I think they describe themselves. I mean, forget the size of Buzzfeed; they're a big company, but what they're focusing on applies to everyone, big and small. Now, they describe themselves as the world's leading independent digital company, and they're sort of leveraging data and innovation to reach, in their case, hundreds of millions of people globally. But it's a far cry from an organization born largely out of what was originally cute cat pictures.
Oh, really?
That's what they traded on originally. But I think you'll see parallels to what we're all probably trying to do in 2021. Even allowing for scale and what they do, the principles are the same, and the concentration areas will be very similar to small companies as well. So anyway, but just to give a background to their story first, it confirmed its plans to go public in June this year. And it made an investor pitch saying it can accelerate growth through newer, faster growing businesses like commerce, selling stuff on their website, essentially as a new revenue stream. Who thinks about doing that now, in these tough times? Have you thought about, selling stuff on your website? And there's various ways of doing that, of course, which is interesting in itself, but the details of its presentations to investors show that Buzzfeed still expects to be heavily reliant on advertising. It's not going away, a business which has struggled to grow over the past few years. So Buzzfeed told its investors expects to generate $654 million in revenue next year, which will be up 25% from this year. So with traditional advertising accounting for 48% of the total, and the rest coming from things like commerce and content. However, the content business consists mainly of new formats of advertising, so branded content. So it's making videos and articles that look like editorial, but they're actually ads. So that means close to 77% of BuzzFeed's revenues next year will effectively come from advertising. So advertising is not going to go away, that's for sure. By 2024, when the company projects it will surpass $1 billion in top line revenue for the first time in its history. These advertising-based revenue streams are expected to account for nearly 70% of the business. So, people may have gone away during the COVID era in terms of not spending too much, but they are coming back. There is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of getting money back from people, and BuzzFeed's a good example of that. And yet, BuzzFeed's growth had slowed over the past couple of years as it struggled to compete in the digital ad market with giants like Facebook and Google and Amazon. And these companies are in effect swallowing up the vast majority of digital ad pounds and dollars, and their shares only increasing. A report earlier this year from research firm eMarketer, who you'll know, said Google, Facebook, and Amazon combined and accounted for 65% of the US digital market alone last year, with Amazon surpassing that 10% share threshold for the first time. So, you need to work with them. Are they a frenemy or an enemy to you? You need to decide, can you work with them or can you do stuff against them? So it's interesting to see where BuzzFeed goes. So their CEO said recently, advertising can still be a good business for us. He said that perhaps controversially, the BuzzFeed will benefit as these big tech companies take a larger share, because the company sells advertising or collects a revenue share from ads appearing next to their content on Google-owned YouTube and Facebook and Snap and other platforms. So if the platform grows, BuzzFeed's platform-based revenue grows too. Yeah. So it's still going to need advertising, but it needs the platforms as well to do so. So it's also banking on growth in commerce, as I said earlier. Currently, its smallest business to accelerate its top line growth. So like other digital companies, it makes money in affiliate commerce. And that means by putting links to retailers' websites within its articles. So if you click on something, you can buy the stuff that you just read about, for example. So if readers click on the link and end up buying something, BuzzFeed gets a cut of the revenue. So Buzzfeed, and there's loads of companies that do that, of course. So Buzzfeed also sells products directly as well as affiliates in areas like cookware, and they have the thing called the Tasty Food brand, and they sell cookware and kitchen stuff and all the rest of it through. And they generated £57 million, in commerce revenue last year, or 14% of their total revenue. And the company just expects that to hit 150 million. That's where again the trends are going next year, or 23% of its total, and then 330 million by the end of 2024, 30% of its total revenue. So the figure's not important here. Again, as I keep stressing, it's the trend that we can learn from. And is this a trend we need to be looking at, even in an area like programmatic advertising I mentioned briefly earlier, which we'll come back to on another show maybe. What will we require our sales teams and our salespeople to actually sell in the future? How will we structure them? What skills will we require from them? So the whole area in itself. A couple of more things regarding that BuzzFeed example is they pitch themselves as a more brand friendly, brand safe place to advertise. So if you don't know what brand safety is, it's what measures are taken to protect the image and reputation of a brand from any negative or damaging influence or questionable or inappropriate content when advertising online. You don't want to be next to a terrible story, do you? And like a murder story next to get your ad next to it. It's not going to be particularly good, or stuff like that. So do people listening or watching here today think that it's important, as you can see from the figures here, of where it's all going? And Buzzfeed also point to how ad spending has been shifting away from traditional media like TV and more towards digital media, and that's again where we should be focusing on a trend they aim to take advantage of. So how well are we doing here? To the point of, do we compare ourselves, whether you're a small business or not, with our competitors around us and try and stack up ours in comparison? In media land, especially in newspapers, for example, one big question they're asking at the moment is, how does print, still an important cornerstone for many, hold up with our digital offerings combined versus the likes of, say, Facebook? Does it give value? Does it get the audience that we want these days? What are we doing about that? Where does it all fit in? So meanwhile, on the plus side, of course, in terms of where we actually are, The Guardian stated recently that advertising spend across the UK media, whilst it fell by more than £1 billion year on year during the coronavirus lockdown, and that's a 48% fall in ad spend from, I think it was 2.3 to 1.2 billion a year. And that was, of course, attributed to the lack of spend on traditional advertising. However, according to the Sunday Times, global ad spend is expected to grow by over 10% to 634 billion this year, with the UK especially outpacing all the other European markets, which is interesting.
Wow. What?
Yeah.
Is there an insight to why?
I think there's just more. I think it's just more the fact there's more creativity attached to. So something we've talked about on the show loads of times is that it's not just about the facts. This is your audience and this is what you should be doing. It's how do you apply data and creativity? We talked about this equation and creating a better customer experience, and that's what people are buying in for. And that leads me on to say that there's a company called Momentum Worldwide, a big research firm, and they suggest that the pent-up demand, which we're expecting to come back to some extent, the demand is for experiences and events, and they could pose, increasingly opportunities for brand sponsorship deals as the constraints have all loosened. So we need to look at what we can in fact turn the dial for us in our particular market, whichever we're working in, whether you're a solicitor or a painter or a media company or whatever it might be. So, and that's good for you, actually, isn't it? Events.
Very much so, yeah. And what's interesting is we've already sold out our hospitality for next year for the concert at Leeds Castle, first time ever. So it seems that it would back up what you've just said, that people are looking to events.
I think it's a double whammy for events organisers. I think it's a double whammy because, one, I think the market was heading that way anyway, of creating a better experience for people with a brand going forward anyway. But and also how you exceed the expectation when they're there.
Yeah.
As you just give them something extra, they walk away going, "Wow, that's brilliant! I'll come back to this."
Yeah.
And also the double whammy bit is the fact that people are being locked up for so long and they want to get out and experience stuff like my Brighton weekend the other week. They want to be back out there doing it. So anyway, finally back to our Buzzfeed CEO. He also highlighted that consolidation and collaboration could well be the way forward. And I've been talking about this for years inside media companies, whereby they just don't work together because of politics or personalities getting away. But it could be after COVID the time now where that could be the way forward, at least partly because bigger companies might have more leverage to extract better terms from, say, the platforms. And that's, I think, why we're seeing changes with the likes of Facebook and stuff now and Google having to agree to terms with publishers now going forward and paying them for the content. So in BuzzFeed's case, they recently acquired a digital lifestyle publisher called the Complex Network, which it doesn't matter what it is for now. It's just the principle behind this. And it's the second acquisition they've made to increase its scale. So they also bought the Huffington Post from Verizon earlier this year. Now they can afford mergers and acquisition activity, but what do you do inside a smaller market? Collaboration, and working together for the good of the industry you're in. It could actually, for the first time ever, be the time to look at doing that. It's time for increasing scale to attract better and more advertising and collaboration with us from your own industry to sell advertising. The UK news industry has seen this recently. Again, it's never done it for years, but they've got this thing called the Ozone Project, which is a collaboration with a digital platform built for brands by the publishers, and they claim to reach 99% of the UK's online adults, and giving an easy way for advertisers to reach, highly attentive audiences and broadcast at broadcast scale in a brand safe and a known environment. Is all very controlled, so you get what you're paying for, and that obviously seems to be the way forward. So, in summary, Buzzfeed are thinking strategically. Why I picked their example, because all the stuff appearing on the screen now is exactly what everyone should be thinking about in terms of the future of advertising. It's about, we've got to be reliant on advertising still. We've got to be looking at new formats, new creativity around what we can do. How do we manipulate and exploit our data as third-party cookies will disappear? And, the Google browser is going to start doing that in the next 12, 18 months. How do we start collecting first-party data going forward? It's so important. And we've got GDPR things. And I think that's where our part 2 of this little session will come in. That we'll talk about third-party cookies and first-party data and what we can do about it going forward. And how do we work or not with the tech platforms? Do we want to work with them? Are they the enemy or the frenemy? How do we look at things like growth in commerce, selling stuff and getting new revenue streams from things like affiliates or selling direct? Is programmatic a way to go, where you're buying an audience digitally and you're opening up your website to people to use themselves and buy into ads from you automatically? And therefore, what's the future of a sales team and your salespeople? Do they have a different role in the future? Do you need them in future? What is brand friendly and a safe place? How do we explore that to give advertisers confidence that they're getting what they want in the right environment? Is consolidation and collaboration the way to go in the industry you're working in? And say, whatever in the industry you're in, how do you work together with the people around you for the benefits of the industry, rather than just trying to cut each other's throat all the time? And in this kind of new world that we're living in, maybe there's a role there for you. And then how do we increase our scale as a result of that? And ultimately, as we've said on this show many times, how do we create a better experience for our customers and our advertisers alike? So I think that's the summary of where advertising's going. I think it's not going away. What I would ask people listening in here is, how do you plan around using your data going forward? How do you create a better experience? How the advertisers actually prefer and therefore want to spend money with you? And more fundamentally, what do advertisers actually think of you? Have you ever asked them? How do you get into the mindset of their radar for consideration of your brand and your website and your digital assets in this sort of post-pandemic world? And I would say, if you think that all sounds confusing, then you start with data. You've got to start with data, and data allows you to find out the detail behind your customers at first party level. You own the relationship. You can be transparent with the customers. You're not using third party people to do so and stuff they didn't really sign up for, your customers, and they're being bombarded with stuff from you which they didn't ask for, and they don't like you as a brand because of it. So you can control the relationship if you have first party data, and you can find out things like demographics and opinions and what their behavior is and what it's going to be likely shift to in the future. And you can start doing all this sort of stuff if it's all about first party data. But we'll save that for another day, because it's got massive implications what's coming in the advertising market in terms of third party data and how third party cookies are going to go away. and what that means, and in GDPR, and how that might be reshaping. And so we'll do that as part 2 of this session in the next show.
Yeah, well, it'd be good maybe to get see if we can get some media people on our show in the coming weeks.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely right. Because there's a lot to be said here, and I think a lot of people want to share. You know, I think, to be fair, there's a lot of people who are quite genuine about wanting to make this better experience, and you know how we enable a better experience for people by using first-party data.
Yeah, get.
But you're right. Yeah, that's
local media
right. We'll try
and national media people.
Or even agency.
A different, see what they're looking for as well. Yeah.
I mean, I have seen. What's that?
So if anyone watching this wants to be on the show, get in touch.
Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are about this. We're really interested, because I do believe there's a genuine, with most people, a genuine requirement in their mind to get it right.
Yeah.
You know, no one wants to fool anyone, which I think there's a lot of that going on at the moment. No one wants to fool anyone, but how do they use their data correctly is the way forward. So I think that's the way to start, and thinking creatively as part of that process too. So, but we'll come back to that.
Excellent. So get in touch. You can contact us through our website, the ukbrandshow.co.uk, on Twitter and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. We would indeed. Any comments on that, and the future of advertising, and where you are as a company in terms of advertising, and how you rely on it or not, as the case may be, we'd be really interested in hearing from you. So that's it for this week. We'll come back with part 2 next time. See you soon, Mark. See you soon. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for joining us.